I heard them in the operating room. I got my first laugh when I was born. I was so ugly, the doctor slapped my mother.
What makes Jerry run? What makes Jerry tick? I would say that part of what drives Jerry is just the need to be constantly active, busy, creative. I think he's, in a certain sense, like William Buckley, who once said that the idea of a vacation lying on the beach and doing nothing was the most horrible thing he could imagine.
I started at 5. I'm in my 75th year of performing. It only came from here. You have to be talented, of course, but longevity comes from your heart. An audience can know that's where it's coming from, as opposed to an audience not knowing what's wrong, but it isn't just perfect. You know what I'm saying? They could not turn to one another and say, well, he has no heart. They don't say that. But they say, something's wrong. It's not really, here. You can't lie to an audience. You can't. Great actresses, great actors, if they didn't have it from here, from their gut, they could never be great. They were only great because of this.
He must be the best. If he's not the best, he's not going to play.
Jerry was kind of bossy, but in a funny way. He had to tell people what to do all the time, but he did it in a kind and funny way.
The passion comes from, I see a little boy who's going to die. But when I come to him and make him laugh, you can't explain what that feels like. To be able to make that child laugh once more is a gift that God gives us, I think. And then I want to be the best of my ability.
What makes Jerry Lewis run? And I think that sometimes human beings, they get tormented by all kinds of things. They get insecure. They get afraid. You know, it's like they always have to keep proving something. And maybe that's kind of what Jerry had to keep doing. I think that it comes from his childhood and his relationship with his father and his background and this desire to be loved. You know, most actors want to be loved. They want approval. And I think Jerry, like so many of us, but Jerry more so wanted like approval. He really wants, looking for love, looking for someone people to care, and maybe this was his way of expressing it in some way, a need, because most actors have that need. But a comedian, most comedians are laughing on the outside and crying on the inside.
Well, I think he you know, like a lot of people who are in this public eye, he likes the attention. I think he's a creative person. You know, he once said to me, he says, I go to the refrigerator, I open the door, the light comes on, I do 10 minutes. And so I think this is part of what drives him. The light goes on, he does 10 minutes. I know that he needs an audience like we need air.
Jerry is driven by insecurity. I think basically he's a very insecure man. I think he wants to be loved by everybody and accepted by everybody. For some reason or other, I think he felt some kind of rejection from his father, or there was always a problem with Danny, his father. And I think this has something to do with his wanting love from everybody. Everybody has to love him. And by loving him, he would have to like buy them presents, hire them. They would be his best friend. They were in every movie that he did. They always did something. He always gave somebody a job.
I think he loves to perform. I think he loves to make people happy, and I think he just needs that connection with the people, you know, with the audiences. And he's just got so much talent. He can do everything. He can sing, he can act. He's a wonderful actor. He's funny, and talk about movement. I mean, the man, I don't know how he's still walking the way he threw himself around with the pratfalls, and I mean, amazing.
You have to love what you do. If you like it, it will go in, forget it. You have to love it and give it everything it's got. No different than a mistress. You must. And when you see the final product, if you're satisfied, you're not a good filmmaker. You have to be dissatisfied and be better next time, and then next time, and then next time.
I think comedians, in general, are people who have had, most of them, not very happy childhoods. And I think comedians' purpose in life and need and want is love me, love me, love me, please love me. Depression can take two forms. One can be the form of the normal depressed person who becomes very withdrawn. You know, they don't want to get out of bed, and they're very, you know, they're tired all the time, and they want to go in. Then there is someone like Jerry Lewis. I think if he was depressed, his depression went completely the other way. Jerry would work 24 hours without ever going to sleep, 36 hours without going to sleep. So the depression in his case could have taken almost a manic sense, which is very common with depression. You can go one way or the other. And if I had to guess, that would be why Jerry was so driven. Because, you know, it's a counter-reaction to the depression, but it's also a way of making it and becoming so successful, which, of course, he was. Most comedians' background are incredibly dysfunctional. And I wouldn't be surprised if his was as well.
I was born in a show business family. I was born in a trunk. I was in a dressing room. My father and my mother were great performers, and that's how I got to be where I am. Fini, period. Now let's talk about today, what's alive. The past is gone. We can't do anything about that. And if I see young people that want to know about someone who was successful, you don't want to go back to show them your success. You want to come to today and how you function now to become successful. Because remember, success is something that a man must work at every time he goes up to the plate.
Well, I discovered at 5 years old I wanted to perform. My mother and father brought me up to be a performer. And from the time I was 5 to the time I was 18, I was doing all the things that I had to learn by my father. And that at 19, I met Dean. And by 20, we were working together.
And by the time I earned $2 million already.
The Jerry Lewis character came out of nowhere like magic. When Jerry was a youngster, he was the class clown. Unfortunately, people don't always understand a youngster with a crazy sense of humor. I believe that someone with that type of sense of humor is very bright. The comedic mind, the comedian's mind, like the mind of Jerry, is always looking for the humor. Somebody with a comedic mind, you will ask them the question, and while they're answering it, their mind is working in all different areas to try to find the humor. Jerry Lewis's mind is very much like that. And he acts out his humor, whereas other comedians will speak their humor. Jerry acts it out with his physical attributes, his faces, his voices. And he was doing his record act in the 1940s, and Jerry Lewis wasn't speaking during his record act. All of that talent was held inside of him.
We did this record act together. Jerry did Danny Kaye's Dina, and he also did the Figaro. I think it was the overture to Figaro that he directed this thing, and he just picked up certain little aspects of the music that he made into a comedy that was just great. We performed at the hotel, and we were really cute. Say he was 15, I was 16. What could be cuter than two teenagers, you know? And we both loved doing it. It was really great fun. When he first came to the hotel, he went to, my parents put him to work as a tea boy. What a tea boy did was serve tea and coffee in the afternoons at 4 o'clock, and at the evenings at like 9, 10 o'clock, tea and cookies. And he was the tea boy. And whatever he did, he was putting on a show. It was the best show in town. He would carry on serving the cookies and serving the tea and pouring the cream. He was just funny all the time.
Then he got together, partially by accident, with Dean Martin in Atlantic City. And when he began to interact with Dean Martin, all of that talent started to come to the surface. All of the Jerry Lewis character, which was actually being held in suspended animation, was now being released, and it came overnight.
As a young boy, I had a lot of problems not understanding what self-esteem was, not understanding that you have to have that before you can. And what you do about it is you go to be with the people that have it. And it's like a massage, it rubs off.
My entire upbringing, from the time I was 5 until I met my partner, I had the best education in show business and in comedy. And Dean, of course, always turned to me for answers about what in show business worked and what didn't and how do we do. And it was very important that I had this great training. I didn't know I was getting that training to meet Dean and become the most important comedy act in the history of the industry.
I'm seeing
When that comedy team of Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis hit in the late 40s, they were a sensation. It wasn't just that they were popular. They were as much of a sensation as Frank Sinatra or Elvis Presley or the Beatles. I mean, it was a phenomenon when they hit. And they started in something that's gone today, nightclubs. They began in nightclubs, and they were famous for wrecking the joint. You know, they'd go to perform, and they'd be stealing cutting people's ties, and eating people's steaks. And I mean, they created a mayhem.
Hold it, you're crazy. We're going to have a toast to the bride. A toast.
A toast. That's what I like to me. I haven't got a grudge. Just give me this. This is the way they do it anyway. Pour it in there, get out of it.
It had happened very fast. When the people found out, like in Atlantic City, that's a city where word of mouth can make you or break you. And we went out, and that town was on fire. We had thousands of people around the nightclub trying to get in to see us. Just after the first week, it was an incredible boom into the galaxies for us.
I saw Dean and Jerry when they first started working, and it was back in Atlantic City. That's where it was. We'd go and hear them night after night. They were very funny. We knew they were going to be big. Jerry was acting like the raving character, and Dean was supposed to be trying to keep him on track, and, you know.
Now he had Dean. Dean was able to react to him almost like a father sometimes, you know, giving him that look or making a comment. Jerry would look to Dean for acceptance, you know. Jerry would do a joke or do something silly, and he would look to Dean, am I a bad boy? Sometimes he was. So now when Jerry is working a nightclub with Dean Martin, Jerry thinks, okay, how did I get a laugh when I was younger? What can I do? People are eating. So he borrowed a jacket from one of the waiters, and he picked up a tray, and he came into the audience as a busboy, and he just started making noise, breaking dishes, picking people's food up off the plate, tasting it, and telling them, oh, this is great, or send it back. And Dean was not aware, not in the beginning. And Dean's reaction absolutely tore the audience apart.
Fix it! What?
Fix the pipe!
Hold it for me, Mr. Martin, and I'll fix it. I'm off. Hold it. Hold it. Thank you very much.
You're laughing. You forgot to take your watch off.
All the comedians in New York would sit in the restaurant after the show. Well, what did they do? Well, you see, the tall guy is handsome, and the little one is a monkey. And they do things together. That was their explanation. Nobody could ever tell anyone what we did. Never. We're out there for 2 hours, and nobody could say what we did. Because there were times when Dean was doing the comedy and I was doing the straight man. We were prepared 50%. Always we had the foundation of always going back to the book of where we rehearsed. The other 50% happened on the stage, which was always the best part. Happened right now. Now. Again.
It's been like that for 20 years.
Yeah, he's got the table laid here.
And it wasn't something that you had to live in New York to understand. That's everywhere. Everywhere you go, you can understand that. It was electricity. It was always a charge when you went to New York and the audiences were waiting outside the theater or waiting outside the Copacabana. Or whenever you're in New York, the people let you know they love that you came. Hey, Jerry! Hey, Dean! From all the people, cab drivers, people in the streets, people up in the buildings yelling, they just welcome you, and it's wonderful. You won't see that in Los Angeles because they're a little, you know. The reason I wrote the book was because my partner died. I thought there was a lot of things that needed to be said. And it's called Dean and Me, A Love Story. And I tell the time we met till the time it was over. That's the whole book. He gave me what I have today. If it wasn't for my partner, I'd still be an act in vaudeville. He gave me my career. He was my best friend in the world, like my father, my brother, my friend. And he never received the credits for being a great talent like I knew he was. And this book is my answer to all the stupid critics that said he was nice looking and he had a nice voice. It was pleasant. They had no idea how great a talent he was and how funny. He was what I call the ignition. You know how you start your car? He started my funny bone.
So kiss me.
He made me funnier. He made me better. I always wanted to do good for him. I wanted him to be proud of me, my big brother. He was very important. I would never have gotten this career without him. It's that simple. And then, $200 million later, we were big stars.
Dean brought a wonderful cadence of fun and silliness, and he ignited the flame under my 9-year-old, because I'm 9. In 1935, I had my 9th birthday, and I never counted one after that. The child in me is what you like best, and the child in me is what I love. I never took myself too seriously. I love when the 9-year-old comes out, because if you ignore and or give up that child, your whole life is a different life. And I believe that as I believe my next breath. To think as a 9-year-old child, my God, the innocence of that, the simplicity of that. You know, pretty fair writer, Emerson said, Simplicity is difficult because it requires nothing less than absolutely everything. That's the commitment you had to make. Full bore, you had to make the commitment. If you didn't want to, then don't go there, because it'll be spoiled.
Well, he couldn't have been nicer to me. He was like fatherly or big brotherly or whatever. He just couldn't have been sweeter. And of course, he was hilarious. And as funny as he was in his way, Dean was, you know, just amazing in his way. They were so different in their humor, but they complemented each other so well. And I think that movie was when they were really getting along great and happy, and kind of not too long after, I guess, they sort of parted, which was sad, which was a shame.
The movies don't really give a good idea of what Martin and Lewis were, or even what Jerry was or is, as much as the television shows they did in the 50s. The live television. That's also a very, very important element, is that it was live, that it wasn't canned, it happened live. And when you see some of those comedy hours, they did 28 of them in 5 years. What is funny when they improvise, when Jerry does something that makes Dean laugh, which then delights Jerry, so he laughs and they both laugh. Those moments are golden because the affection between them and the enjoyment of kind of destroying the situation or whatever it is that they're doing is infectious, and it had a kind of anarchistic quality.
They came to my uncle and said, well, we have a new team now. It's made up of, well, the man, there's a singer, and he's a cross between Cary Grant and Bing Crosby. And then we have the comedian, and he's a cross between a chimpanzee and whatever other jungle creature you could think of, and that was Jerry Lewis. It was my uncle's job to keep them under control and to formulate what would be the Martin and Lewis segments of the Colgate Comedy Hour.
Nothing? No, I don't mind. Well, forget it. Get off the couch.
And I laughed when he would do funny things. The audience is very contagious to watch someone really laughing. A lot of performers make believe they're laughing, but that's not real, so it doesn't mean anything. We were having such a good time. We were having so much fun. We used to laugh after the show and say, they're giving us money for this. It's never the audience. A lot of actors say, well, they were very bad tonight. Bullshit. What do you mean bad? It's the same audience that's always there. You were bad. You have to fix what you did. That audience of 2,000 people can't be wrong. If they weren't laughing, you weren't doing it right. When you believe that, and you examine your own work, because they are entitled to you doing your best. When an actor or a comedian doesn't give 100%, they're not going to react. I do one thing when I get through with a show. I walk in my dressing room, and to myself I go, bravo. I knew I did a great one. But I don't need anyone to tell me I did bad, because I have an inner government that says, boo, boo, go home and practice, you schmuck, Boo! We did enough. And we decided before it is verfallen, and we were not verdict, we were smart. We said, let's quit while we're way ahead, while we're on top. And that's what we decided to do because we both wanted to do more things. He knew he could do great work without having me around. And I knew I could do great work that I've learned from him to go on and be a good creator.
Well, the conflict was brought about by the fact that, you know, the press throughout the entire time that they were together, a lot of the press said, oh, Jerry's funny, Dean is just straight man. And they were missing the point. And they missed the chemistry, which is what made it work. And Dean was funny too, but he had a completely different way of being funny. And that wasn't noticed by most writers until they broke up.
What? Wrestling matches! I love wrestling matches! Oh!
All right, sit down, son, and I'll read the paper.
There was these two comedians, really. But one of them was dry and cool, and the other was a zany. So I think Dean getting the short end of the stick, as we say, for years, and being criticized and being not much, and just a singer, and nothing without Jerry and so on, I think it probably got under his skin. Both felt that they couldn't go forward with the relationship the way it was because what made the thing work was the warmth and mutual admiration of the relationship. And when that was diminished, then the team was diminished.
I believe I was about 9 years old. Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis were doing a telethon in New York for the Muscular Dystrophy Association. And my uncle was the producer, I believe the producer and director of that show. And he told me while I was backstage with him that this was going to be Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis's last television appearance together. And I couldn't believe it. Everybody heard about their fights and they had a temporary breakup and they always got back together again. But I was astounded and very sad. As a youngster, I felt that with all of the love that Martin and Lewis showed to each other during their performance, that bond could never be broken. And a youngster would worry that, well, if Martin and Lewis could break up, maybe my parents could break up. And why did it happen? Irreconcilable differences. There was not one incident. I mean, you hear so many stories about the wives didn't get along together, and that it was Dean's drinking, and that Jerry was too much of a dynamo, and Dean only wanted to rehearse. And probably, if you take all of these little incidents and put them together, you come up with the final solution.
You never replace it. You miss that. I mean, I walk on a stage and I look to my right immediately. He's not there. It's a terrible feeling. But that's the way we went, and that was fine. But what I did to get over it was to recognize all he taught me and what I got from our friendship and our love affair. All I did was take the 9-year-old and put him out front. He didn't need any help at that point, and he was doing everything as a single, which is the same as what he did as a double, but there was one less voice, that's all.
I was the first leading lady to work separately with both of them because I did Dean Martin's first solo movie, called 10,000 Bedrooms. And then right after that, I did Jerry Lewis's Cinderfella. So I was the first leading lady who worked with both of them separately, you know, right after their breakup. Dean is very laid back, you know, had a little thing to practice his golf stroke on the set all the time. And with Dean, you never knew if it was a rehearsal or a take, which was wonderful. With Jerry, the intensity was very strong and just different. You know, they're day and night as far as personalities. You know, Dean was always very laid back and Jerry was always quite intense. He would be in his bungalow, I think, when we were filming at 6 o'clock in the morning, and there would be a meeting for everybody at 8 o'clock, and that's after we got into makeup, you know. So right from the beginning of the day, we would be driving our cars 280 miles an hour at 7 o'clock in the morning, you know what I'm saying?
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Jerry Lewis.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You're very kind. Thank you. Something happened in television. September the 5th, 1976, that I suspect has become part of television history.
Would you send my friend out, please?
In watching that, I can't help but rethink how 20 years went by and two men never spoke. The love affair of all time between two men in their work and in their private lives, and they didn't talk for 20 years when it was over. Then it took a friend like Frank, who has been butchered by the press over the years, who cared enough to take that chance. It was kind of touchy, a little risky, to come on my turf not knowing how I'd react. And he did this for us, and it was marvelous.
Should have been a Jew that did it. We could whip the world without the guns of Navarro. There they are, folks.
I don't know.
So how you been?
You know, it seems like we haven't seen each other for 20 years.
Well, you know, there was all those rumors about our breaking up, and then when I started the show and you weren't here, I believed it.
I'll show you guys to your room if you like. The lights are out upstairs, so follow me. Oh, he drinks a lot, this kid.
So you working?
He was very fond of Dean. I had a theory that the only way to get fired from the Jerry Lewis office is to say something bad about Dean. He really admired Dean.
I always found that there's wonderful humor in pain. When you hit your finger with a hammer, ah, oh, woo, ah, it's the funniest stuff you ever saw. Much funnier than drinking tea and a little tea splash. Oh, I'm so sorry. Much funnier. Humor comes from pain, and people in a theater can identify with that man who's in trouble. See, comedy is a man in trouble.
It's a good note.
I always made Jerry every man. Every man to dream about, every man maybe one day it'll happen, and everyone in the audience, that's me. I never let Jerry get above the norm. I've always kept him right in the audience's lap. That's why if you do the wrong kind of material, you leave your audience behind. That's why it doesn't work. They can't identify.
I begin to see that he is an interesting bridge, a bridge that's not crossed properly between a certain kind of story structure and a certain use of animated gags.
Yes, I was on when you yelled. It's just a very, very minor detail. An adjustment in the back will fix the snow, you'll see. The snow is terrible. It just... I'm gonna get in the set and fix the snow because it, that's all. It's just, yeah, the small, minor adjustment. I mean, I'm gonna open and adjust, so, because the snow, that doesn't help you, get a, It never snows in California, but it's cold. It's... I can't stop it. Where's the button?
But I think the personality that they played was this endlessly pubescent, whiny, kind of strange Schlemiel character, a bad luck character, Schlemazel actually I think in Yiddish is one, a person with no luck. You know, no matter what you do, you're cursed. He's often in the service industry, serving these foolish new rich people, and it's supposed to be a comment on the silliness of this entire world, and obviously using the kind of Frank Tashlin sort of animation gags to play with it as a kind of slapstick.
What Tashlin did was relegate it. He uniformed it. Use it here, don't use it there. And he was like my teacher, Tashlin. He was brilliant. Because everything I ever did, I always thought cartoon. Everything to me was a cartoon. And Frank thought cartoons.
Jerry had great respect for Frank. Frank had come, from directing cartoons and so forth, and he finally, got into live action. I personally love this man. Frank was an exceptional man. He was a director, an actor's director. He was he saw the whole perspective I felt of the picture, and I could see where Jerry would listen to a lot of things that they say, and I don't think, from what I observed, I don't think there was too much conflict where Jerry kind of tried to control things, although Jerry always wanted to control a little bit.
Comedy is a very serious business. It's harder to do than drama. People can work hours on perfecting a bit of timing and setting up a joke or setting up a moment. Jerry suffered, I'm sure, from taking all those pratfalls. He must have suffered with his body, and he would do it over and over if necessary and never complain about it.
With comedy, it should hit you right now. Right now. The rhythm is there. Not that, but right now. And frames will change that dynamic. I've changed scenes by 3 frames, from throwing it out to keeping it as the high spot in the movie. 3 frames.
One time, we were doing a show with Lawrence Harvey, and I got the remote up in my office, and I saw him take a fall over the bar, and he didn't get up immediately. So I got on the phone, I called the doctor, left him a drive-on pass, and ran down to the set. And Lawrence Harvey was coming out, and he said, he's looking for you. And I came in, and he said, call the doctor, and I said, he's on his way. And I knew that you can only, 50 years of falling on your back, something's gonna break. And I knew from when I saw him start to gain weight, I knew that it was the cortisone.
Jerry was almost very physical, which he's paying for in the latter part of his life, because as you know, part of what he's dealing now has to do with him having fallen and down to the floor and hurt himself to be funny, and his body now, as you get older, says you can't do that to my body anymore, and that's why he has to be on the medication that he's on, because his body has taken incredible abuse.
He's a unique comic figure. Chaplin has a unique quality. Keaton, Harold Lloyd, and Jerry Lewis is, you know, we know what you mean when you say Jerry Lewis. He's wild. He's crazy. He's the idiot. He's the perpetual 9-year-old.
He likes to play the clown because clowns always kind of are accepted. You know, you go to a circus and everybody laughs at a clown. You know, everybody, the clown is always the funny thing and the clowns are always, but do you remember some of the clowns, they'd have the tears coming down their face, kind of? Jerry could get to your heart. Something about him on the screen. You always wanted him to win. That's the key. You always were with him because he was like a loser who became a success. Who couldn't identify with that kind of story?
I think they identify with him because I think, for the most part, he plays someone who's not that smart or that sophisticated. I mean, that's the character he takes on. And then sometimes he'll fool you and drop to a serious moment where he becomes more Jerry Lewis. He reveals a little bit of Jerry Lewis, the man, and then he goes back into the character that he portrays.
Show me something that'll make me laugh, that's simple, unabridged, uncomplicated, and that's what my magic has been in all of these countries in the world. I speak their language without even talking. They understand my faces, they understand my fear, they understand my love, and all of that stuff is in my character. I can't leave him at the studio. He comes home with me. I sleep with him. Nervous, frightened. What is it going to be like to be on a soundstage with cameras and a crew? I got over that the first 2 days. I was fine. But before we got to that studio that first day, I thought my heart would come out of my chest. Very nervous. You see, I was an usher at the New York Paramount. And when all of the companies wanted to sign Martin and Lewis to a movie deal, I held out. I said to Dean, let me choose the studio, would you? He says, I know the studio. You want Paramount? I said, yeah. Because when I was an usher, I watched all the films that they made in-house. I knew where the backlot was. I knew where that was. And I loved it. It was like utopia for me. And sure enough, Paramount came knocking, and I said, we go now. And we signed the deal with Paramount. I loved it. Well, from the first day I got to the studio, they couldn't find me. I was in the camera department, in the editing department, wardrobe department, makeup department. I knew every job on that set in the first 2 years I was at the studio. I had to know how it all worked. I didn't know why I had to know. I know now because it was going to make me one of comedy's best directors. I didn't know that at the time. When I wrote The Bellboy, I called Billy Wilder. I offered him a deal if he would direct my movie, because I knew I was doing something unusual and that it needed a good hand at the helm. He said, Jerry, I love the script. It's terrific, but you should direct it. I said, but I've never done that. He said, it's okay. You've written it like a director. Whether you know it or not, you have. Go and direct it. I said, but Billy, I wanted one of the best directors in the world to do this picture. That's why I'm making the offer. He said, you can't afford me. My company and your company can never merge. I said, well, I have an idea. Why don't you do it for nothing? He said, when you do it for nothing, I'll do it for nothing. But we couldn't make a deal. I had 2 days before we started shooting, and I directed it. That first night I called my father. I said, Dad, I did things I didn't know I knew. I did great. I did things I didn't know I knew. He said, stay there and don't forget that as you go and you keep creating, you're going to find things that you never expected that you would use. And that's what happened. So I had my first success with the bellboy. Paramount, once I started shooting, Paramount said, you're making a silent movie. I said, no, no, no. What do you mean a silent movie? Everyone's talking. There's music, there's people. It's like any other movie. The kid ain't talking. No, we're nervous about it, Jerry. We don't want to participate. So they pulled out. I was shooting 5 days already, and my budget on the movie was $995,000. That was my whole budget. So I picked up the tab. I said, okay, I'll pay for it. To this day, Paramount executives throw up when they hear Bellboy, because we have done almost $200 million in these 40 years with the Bellboy.
Before I ever did Cinderella, the movie that I did with Jerry, I did a television special with him called The Jazz Singer. And it was shot at NBC, and it was right after we did that. He had already cast the princess for Cinderella, then they started already filming, and then something happened with the leading lady. I don't know what happened, but I replaced her. He had a director doing Cinderella, but he mainly really directed the movie. He really was orchestrating everything. I don't mean musically, you know.
Fella, I love you.
You can't love me.
Eddie Morse was a casting director at Paramount, and Eddie really, really liked me. He had cast me in a couple of television shows previously. So when he found out that Jerry was looking for a very sexy-looking girl for It's Only Money, he brought me into the office. So I go in to meet Jerry. Now, he's sitting behind at this desk, and this is Jerry Lewis. And I'm this little girl from Minnesota, and I saw all of his movies with Dean Martin, and I'm like, oh, you know, nervous, and my knees are together and knocking. So Jerry said, don't be nervous. He said, did it ever occur to you that the person behind the desk may be as nervous as the person that I'm interviewing? Well, in retrospect, I know he was just trying to make me comfortable, but it kind of did. So then he did some test shots on me in front of a camera with different kinds of lighting and things. And I was this sexy lady in a sequin dress with lots of cleavage and sitting on a desk with the legs crossed and putting on lipstick. And Jesse White's in the picture. He plays the detective. So I'm sitting there, lipstick on. In walks Jesse and grabs me and gives me this big kiss. Jesse said, that's the longest screen kiss I've ever had. In fact, he said, that's the only screen kiss I've ever had. It lasted 45 seconds. And Jerry's watching in the background, comes in and goes, comes up and grabs me and gives me a kiss. I mean, there I was, kissing Jerry Lewis. This was pretty exciting from a little girl from Minnesota.
The errand boy was exactly the way I was when I went to Hollywood. I just remembered everything I did those first 2 years, from 48 to 50, and wrote The Errand Boy. On all of my recollections of what I did, literally, when I arrived there. I walked on a set while they were shooting. I almost got killed. I was in the wrong department. I talked on a microphone that was hot to us. I mean, I took all those things that I did and I put them in the movie. And I did even more than that, which I couldn't. It was wonderful.
Haven't you anything to say?
Ma. No!
He was doing a movie called The Ladies' Man, and he said he wanted me to be in it. And I said, I'd love to. He said, I've written a very good part for you. He said, we're going to call you Miss Suganer, which is a Jewish word. It means crazy, okay? So I did the part, and we had a scene in the movie where I had to beat him up. He was like the delivery boy, and he would deliver mail to all the girls in this, like, rehearsal club, which it was a place for aspiring young actresses. So he knocks on my door, and I say, hey, kid, wait a minute. Listen, I'm an aspiring actress, and I'm auditioning for this part. Maybe you could help me? Sure, what do you want me to do, lady? What do you want I should do? I said, you knock on the door, and I'll answer it in a couple of different ways. So he knocks on the door.
I don't believe it.
The first one I did was like a takeoff on Marilyn Monroe, and it was like, hi, honey. How are you? Oh, you look so handsome.
Hi, honey. Gee, it's good to see you again. I missed you.
I like this scene.
It's been a long time.
What am I doing talking to you after leaving me and the kids? Who do you think I am? Boom! Smacked him.
What am I, crazy or something, even talking to you after not hearing from you for such a long time? Now you stay out of my life once and for all!
I got it again.
Anyway, the end of each sketch that I did 3 of them. It always ended up the same way. Boom! And the last one, I hit him so hard that I spun around like this. And I didn't mean to hurt him, but he got really upset. He went to the dressing room, and he wouldn't talk to me. And he said, you don't like me. I said, that has nothing to do with it. I said, I'm acting. I'm doing the part that you wrote for me, and this is what you wanted me to do, and I'm doing it. He didn't really direct the actors. He directed the whole overall scene, but he never worked with the actors individually. He wasn't an actor's director. He was a strange man, but very insecure, and I think that's where all his problems come from. I think he's insecure, needs the love of everybody, needs all these women to love him. He needs everybody's love. But he is a very talented man. You can't get away from that. He's unique, he's one of a kind, and there'll never be another Jerry Lewis.
Did an ad campaign in America. John Barrymore did it, Frederick March did it, Spencer Tracy did it. Now, Jerry Lewis? Okay. But that was what I searched for, to get the classic film with him, and it worked. It was the best work I've ever done. And I wanted to be able to keep the original idea of good and evil with humor.
You have to be, wait, it's connected. You better not press that. Just pull it right out. Oh, that really snapped.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, no, try. Leave
If you could. Oh, no. Let me have this on. Just may I have that out? Okay. All right, now you just hold some of the bottom.
You're in trouble with the idea because you can't get it better than what they made, so you don't try to do that. What you try to do is to do a satire, and satire never works in film, so you get the satirical ideas and bring them down to the audience's level and see if it works. And I was thrilled that it worked because I worked very, very hard on the key character, which was the professor. I worked very hard to keep him simple, clear, precise, and not convoluted so the audience wonders what's happening. When we got to the other guy, he had to be so 360 degrees the other way. And that was the tough part in writing it. When I shot it, I knew I had it. When I looked at him the first day with the makeup, I said, yeah, that's my professor. I went 55 days shooting just the professor's stuff. Then it came time I had to shoot Buddy Love. I hated it. But he was good. He played that part perfect against the professor. And it worked. I felt that I made my challenge work.
People have accused me of Buddy Love being my partner. Come on. I loved my partner. I couldn't write that nasty shit about someone I love.
I was very happy to be in a movie with Jerry Lewis, and Frank Tashlin introduced me to Jerry on the Paramount lot. And Jerry was making a picture called Cinderfella, and he ran up the stairs, this red carpet, and at the top of it, just after I met him, he plopped down. He had a heart attack. They sent a gurney in. They took him away to the hospital. That was when I first met him. And then he was all right. He has miraculously recovered a lot of times from things, Jerry. And so it came a time when he did the love of his life, the picture that he loves the most, which was sort of a redo of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and it was The Nutty Professor. And unbeknownst to me, he had asked the Paramount people there to get them the most talented ingenue that they could find to be with him and do this picture. And they said, well, we have Stella Stevens under contract. And he had already met me with Frank Tashlin, whom he knew very well, was a dear friend of. And so I had a meeting with him.
She was the prettiest girl at Paramount. I had seen a film she did, and she was just excellent. And I saw her in the commissary one day, and I said, my God, my girl in the script is Stella. I said, Stella, would you like to be Stella? She said, oh God, yes. And she was wonderful. Classy lady, good actress, and beautiful. There were times that I directed Stella on the stage and then off the stage.
I did enjoy that picture probably better than anything I have ever made, because Jerry then took me under his wing, and Jerry was using the video assist, and people were calling him crazy. And now not a person alive can make a movie without a video assist. And he had to see himself as he was doing the comedy, the physical comedy that he did, and he could come back and look at himself. If he liked it, he printed it. If not, he tried another. But I was known as One Take Stevens because he liked only to take one take of everything. He thought the first take was the freshest, the quickest, the best, and that it had everything going for it. And usually, if I didn't get overly excited, I could do my best take the first time.
The most wonderful thing was watching Jerry direct this film. I mean, here he'd be on the set and he'd be Jerry Lewis. Then he would, the Buddy Love character, which was so...
And he'd go into the Nutty Professor with this kind of a thing,
and you go, action, I mean, I'm still amazed to this day. I mean, the man is a genius. There is no question in my mind. I mean, I think that he has more ability in his little finger than most of these comedians have today.
It was obvious that she loved the man no matter what face he showed her. She loved both sides of him. The side that wanted to be so hip and like a nightclub entertainer and all that, and the others that was a Casper Milquetoast kind of teacher who couldn't even really speak to people very well because he was shy. So she wanted maybe the best of both worlds, and she did finally get the best of both worlds. And I think that it's fun that when she walks away with them in her pockets of her blue jeans, that she's going to try it for fun sometime, and I think that's okay too. I think it's a very cute way he ended the movie.
The thing that you have to give your audience is a rooting interest. Do you understand what I mean by a rooting interest? So every time a female would turn him down and he tried again, they were hoping it would work. And that's the rooting interest that you try to get with any partnership, any kind of relationship in a film. It's wonderful that the audience says, yeah, I hope he does. I hope he does. Because they're hoping that they do. It's the same thing.
Stanley, my boy.
Yeah.
How would you like to make $150 each and every week?
Mm-hmm.
Carol. Quiet, Harry, quiet. I think he's trying to tell us something. All right. 175, but that's it.
The Patsy was a perfect example of some innocent man that worked as a bellboy, that they all decided for him, the world outside, the society decided he will be something else. Come. And he goes, and he does what they tell him. For the right reason. They're going to pay him. Everyone in that audience will do a lot of things that they never thought about to get some amount of money. And that's what the Patsy was built on. This kid was trying to make a living. I don't care if I'm carrying a tray or singing. He didn't know he couldn't sing. He didn't know he couldn't do comedy. But they believed that they could make him something he wasn't. That's a great rooting interest for your audience. Great rooting interest. They want him to make it. Because they make it if he makes it. And the wonderful scene that I was told by a lot of people that saw the Patsy was at the premiere when he changed his clothes. They applauded in the theaters when that came on. When he finished doing it and walked in the theater, they applauded that. What were they applauding? A great actor? No. They were applauding themselves, that I could have done that. It was simple. I could have done that. And I understand how good he felt walking into that theater. Well, that's what I wanted to get. When I wrote it, I was hoping I would get that from the audience, and I did. That they applauded that first preview night, I'll never forget it as long as I live. They absolutely cheered and applauded that sequence. Well, it did for me what I hoped it would do for the movie, and it did.
And they started production already on this film. And they were shooting at the Doheny Estates. When I went to meet with Jerry, he had ensconced himself into the ballroom, which was a huge room, and he had two policemen standing on either side of the door. It was almost like being in London, you know, in front of the castle when they wouldn't talk. They just look at you very stoic, you know. And it was like going in to meet the king. And I said, can I be funny? And he said, no, you're not allowed to be funny. I said, well, I thought, be quiet, Karen, just do the job. So I said, I would be delighted to be your leading lady. He was not at all what I expected. You know, we get a perception of what we think people are. And even though I've been in the industry for many years, I still was unprepared for who he really is. He was very serious. He was a great businessman. He was very warm and very good looking. I thought he was very attractive. And you know, you don't always think of him that way because you see the sketches of him. You see him making those incredible faces that he makes so beautifully. You don't think of him as being a very handsome, serious businessman. It just blew me away. And so I got the job. In working with him, he didn't rehearse. And luckily for me, I had done a lot of live television in my past, and a lot of theater, a lot of films. So actually, I was able to be improvisational with him, because you have to be, because you don't know what he's going to do, which makes it the challenge even greater and really more fun. But we worked very well together, and he would come onto the set. Half the time he didn't even say good morning. He'd just come onto the set, and we'd start the scene. We wouldn't rehearse it, but Frank Tashlin, who was our director, would say, well, I want you to start here and end up here and stop here. You know, it was that kind of thing, which was a little unusual. But that's how we worked. And then he would print the first rehearsal, which was on film, and then we'd run over to the monitor to take a look at what we just shot. When Jerry and I had our sort of love scene where I tell him how I feel about him, and I know he's interested in another girl, and it breaks my heart, and I get a chance to cry and everything, which is kind of unusual for a Jerry Lewis movie.
Because you love her. Does she love you?
She doesn't even know I'm alive. And if you don't say anything, she never will. Now let's get back to the spaghetti sauce, huh?
But I don't understand.
I don't either.
I remember that he pulled me aside and says, how do you do that? I mean, that's just great. I love that. I love the fact you can cry. I said, you know something? I said, you know what I would like you to consider, which he did do, not because I suggested it, but I saw it. I said, you'd make a heck of a heavy. I said, you should play an evil son of a bitch. Not because he is one, but because I could see he had that ability to make that star turn. And I always thought he had a greater range than he even allowed himself to have.
Well, somebody once said, if you have a very funny man, you always wish you had two. He made you laugh so much, you think, I wish there was two. So I made a film where I was 7. The Family Jewels. I played all the characters. It's fun to do for an audience. An audience loves to see what else you can do in a different character. Can you still be funny, or can you stay within the storyline?
I was an airline stewardess, and I was observing when they got on the airplane, reacting to, who is this character? Because he was dressed up, and he had this old airplane and dressed up with a big mustache. And, you know, when Jerry got into some of these characters, he was wonderful.
Oh, Diana! I'd like you to meet my little niece, Donna. Donna, Diana, my little niece, Diana. Donna, I'm taking the big bird up. I've got this flight, and I was wondering if you would be good enough to guard over this precious little body until I return this evening.
Not at all, Captain. Who in the world? I mean, who's going to take the trip with you?
Some elderly lady motorcycle riders.
Oh.
Yes, she's right. By golly, she knew. Good head. Well, I'm off to the blue yonder, and take off Dallas.
This picture was, of course, it was Jerry starring, Jerry directing, Jerry producing, Jerry writing. But there was plenty of silliness, and I learned some different ways of behavior as an actor with Jerry, because Jerry doesn't like take 2, or certainly doesn't like take 3. He likes take 1, and so the way we worked would be to rehearse, improvise, and then have a pretty good idea of what we were going to be doing. And then, if the scene involved Jerry, he would do something utterly different on take 1, and you had to adjust so everyone was fresh and alive on take 1. And that most frequently was the take that was used. This is one of those moments where Jerry threw the actors a curve, where we started rolling and didn't know what was going to ensue. And he wound up doing this comic walk and fell, and we were all just trying to deal with it, cope with, and the camera is rolling, so we stayed alive.
The kid did it anytime, anywhere, never thinking about it, which is the way a young kid should be. Have no responsibility, not having to really accommodate rules or regulations. He did it at anywhere, anytime. When you travel in the world of comedy for 40 years or 50 years, you better let the people see how you are today. You may still carry some of that craziness, but carry it in the body you have now. Don't make it up so you look younger. That's a lie. It won't work.
I did Cracking Up, which was the last picture I did in 1982. And I played a French marquise from the 15th century, and I had to speak fractured French. And when I went in for this interview, I hadn't seen Jerry since about 1964, 65. So he asked me, he said, "Can I do fractured French?" And I said, yes. And he said, okay. So he said, "Je m'allais entraîner, je le qu'est-ce que c'est da 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 da." And I said, "Oh, mais non, qu'est-ce que doit pas, je lis." He says, "What are you doing here? You got the job." He was very nervous, by the way, when he did, he was directing it, and a lot of pressure was on him for this picture. And he was smoking a lot, and I think he'd been through, divorce had already happened, and he had, Sandy was on the set. I'd never seen him with a woman before. I mean, she was holding on to him, and right after that, he had the heart attack. Right after that, he got sick. It was a lot of pressure. He seemed to be a lot more stressed at that particular point, 1982. Very, very stressed. I hadn't seen him like that, no. This was a little bit different. There was something going on. I mean, you know, he'd been through the divorce with Patty, which, you know, probably was not an easy thing, and starting a new relationship, and, of course, marrying Sandy later. You know, we never know what's going on in anybody's mind, and to stand out and maybe judge somebody when we don't know what agonies or what thoughts were behind all this or what provoked something, but obviously something was very stressful. He was smoking much too much at the time.
Well, it's a stretch. You get a chance to do a character that is different from anything you've ever done, and a lot of people liked it and a lot of people didn't like it. They felt deceived a little bit. King of Comedy was the most critical acclaim I ever got in the world, but a Jerry Lewis fan didn't like it. Wait, that's not my Jerry. That's a regular man, a grown-up. He's being stalked by people and they're putting his life in danger. I don't want to see that. Get someone else to be him. What's interesting, when Marty Scorsese called me about King of Comedy, he said, "We need you to come to New York and talk to Bobby and me, De Niro and me, because we don't understand celebrity," which they didn't. And at that time, Bobby had just done Raging Bull, did Mean Streets, he did Taxi Driver. He could walk on the street anywhere and nobody would know who he was. So he wanted, and Marty Scorsese wanted to find out from me, what is celebrity like? I said, come with me tomorrow afternoon. We'll meet on 5th Avenue and we'll just walk 4 blocks. And nobody knew who they were, and the people were jamming me. Autographs. Jerry, will you talk to my father on a cell phone? I mean, all over the street. We finally had to get into a cab and go back to the hotel. They said, does that happen everywhere? I said, yeah, all the time. I can't go shopping. People are always doing it. But I love it. If they didn't do it, I'd be miserable. But that's what celebrity is.
A total filmmaker is a man that starts from the beginning and is there at the end. And he does all of the work to make that film from day one, from the minute I started writing the film. I put the right people together, I brought them to me, and I had them understand making a film is forever. It will be your mark, no pun intended, it'll be your mark for the rest of your life. You have to do it with me, with the same passion that I bring to it. And then, of course, my members of my crew feel my passion, and they jump aboard. And it was difficult because I needed to be so on. I had my personal vanity, my personal ego, all that shit that gets in your way most of the time. I needed to recognize that the director was the best, and he was. That the writer was the best, and he was. The actor I had would bring me a stellar performance, and he did. So I had all the good things going in that, you know, a lot of people think he's writing, he's producing, he's directing, he's acting. You don't do that because you think you'll do that one day. Each role is 8 hours work. According to my mathematics, that's 32 hours a day to do it all and protect the writer, protect the director, protect the producer, protect the actor.
He did a lot of unusual things, Jerry. He broke the fourth wall often in terms of going right to the audience.
And you be, would you excuse me? No, I was talking to him, and I just thought, no, would you mind excusing us for a minute? Because I was...
Breaking the fourth wall. That's called breaking the fourth wall. Letting the audience in on the fun. I always loved to do that because when I was making films in the late 50s and 60s, we didn't have television showing the public everything that's going on in the world. And we still had the one thing in Hollywood that was the mystery and glamour of the industry. I like to take the people back to show them what's really happening. And that was fun for me, and the audiences loved it. They loved whenever I broke the fourth wall.
You shouldn't be chasing because... Aren't you overacting a little bit, Miss Baldwin? Balance. It's a movie. See, I'm fine. The people in the theater know I ain't gonna die. Here, it's a movie stay. Here, look at it, see? There's wires and lights, and I'm gonna make more movies, so I couldn't die. It's like a make-believe. It's a dumb city.
Mr. Lewis, you are a complete nut.
Which reminds me, I'm having nuts and whipped cream for lunch. Would you join me, please? Crew, that's lunch. 1 hour for the actors and 7 days for the technicians. It's a movie set, breaking once and for all. The ghost to have fun.
He had a kind of, again, a kind of anarchistic approach, which was very modern. It's with us today, but he was doing it 40 years ago.
His films are farces about anarchy, but animation also is a system of how to make anarchy tell a story. So I think in a way he continues what the animated film had developed. It's not a form of drama exactly. His work has a feeling that you're watching the world being held together by string and rubber bands, and it's just exploding in all directions.
Come on out!
And he's very, very sharply analytical in terms of watching comedy. He knows what he's doing, and he knows how to analyze if it's good. He'll look at it and say, no, he was no good there. He should do that again, you know. No, he has an amazing sort of objectivity, ability to be objective.
1953, it was the beginning of independent production. And I said, that's what we want. We want to control our work, control the material that we buy, and control that somebody, not because we wanted control, but we didn't want him to have the control. That was the the very most important reason. If he was a great producer, okay. But he wasn't always a great producer, so we had control. Finally, we had it, and when you get it, you never want to give it up because it protects your work. I knew everything about what I put on the screen. I knew how to get it there. I knew what it should be, and what the audience would pay tickets to look at. I learned from the best people in the business. When you are working your heart and your mind out, writing the material, you better be sure the camera is placed in the right place for that material, that the editing is correct for that joke, and that all of the music that you use is exactly how you want it for that scene. You had to learn it all to be in control of your work so it doesn't get spoiled somewhere along the line. You only live once. If you do it right, once is enough. And I do it with such love and such passion, every part of the job. It's all in my book. The Total Filmmaker says exactly what you must feel and how you have to go about making the project acceptable to the ticket buyer. When you get into that what we call the mix, your passion takes over. And all of a sudden, you're working 19, 20 hours. You go home, it takes 30 minutes to go home, 30 minutes to come back to the studio. I'd have 2 hours to shower and sleep for a few minutes and back. And then you say, where is this energy coming from? It's coming from adrenaline. When you are happy, you get high. I mean, I was high like those people get on crack cocaine. I was getting it a natural high. The excitement of doing funny work. It's that simple. I mean, there are people in this country will say to you, I hate Jerry Lewis. Then there are some people who say, I love him. You're going to get both. But this one is stronger than the other one. Thank God.
He's somebody I know for a long time, you know. Nothing has changed for Jerry, you know. He's still the same kid I knew when he was a kid. Life has not seemed to penetrate into him. He's very insular, you know. Nothing has changed. That's the only remark I can make about Jerry. Life has not made any imprint on him. Intriguing, isn't it? Either his ego or the shell that surrounds him is unpenetrable.
I think he's extraordinary, and I think that when we have heroes, we can't wait to tear them down and belittle them and hurt them and get rid of them. You know, there's so much jealousy out there.
I mean, Americans have a wonderful ability to turn on their own heroes and to renounce their own popular culture. There's a certain snob element that turned against him or whatever, and there's people who don't like him, think he's vulgar and crass or whatever. So there's a sophisticated sort of disdain for Jerry, that he's just kid stuff. And he did appeal to kids, and so that automatically makes him into something less in certain circles. There's nobody left from his generation, from that generation, of that kind of show business personality, you know, which combines Al Jolson and Judy Garland and Charlie Chaplin and Keaton, I mean, and Frank Sinatra, and it's a whole world that's gone. Jerry's just about the last survivor. And it's a complicated thing, as Jerry is not only a performer, and a brilliant performer, but he's also director, writer, producer, innovator. He's, as I say, complicated. It's not easy to say, well, Jerry Lewis is a funny person, period.
I think the character is no different than I am when it comes to love. He needs it as much as I do. And I want it as much as he does. And I think that the human condition gives us the answer, which is, when we all get up every morning, we walk out into the world and seduce them and hope in return they will like us. Every day that we get up, we want the outside world to accept us and like us. Well, that develops, once it gets going, it develops into love. And love is what makes the world go round. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. I was very sick for 3 years, and my little girl took me through it. She brought me and saved my life. She brought me through the illness because the love is so strong that I didn't want to leave it. And I was frightened that I might leave it. So I worked very hard to get better. I worked very hard to lose 75 pounds and get back to what I used to look like, all because of love. That's what makes every human being functional. Without it, they turn into serial killers. Without it, they turn into pedophiles. Without it, we have nasty human beings out there in the world. They've never known love, and the worst part is that they have no outlet to give it. And I've studied that all of my life. Yeah.
That's my way of saying that it's you. I want to know. My blue eyes you.
Absolutely.
I belong to you know who.
I said hi. Oh. Hey, Jerry! Hey, Jerry! Hey, it's Jerry! Hey, Jerry!